Welcome everyone to the June installment of Out&Equal's Virtual Summit webinar series titled Unintentional Exclusion, Illuminate Your ERG's Blind Spots. My name is Ben Demers. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Senior Associate at Out&Equal University. I'll be your host for today's call. During today's session, we'll be discussing ways to make employee resource groups or business resource groups more accessible to all members of our community, including bisexual, pansexual, queer, and non-binary employees, as well as employees who do not label themselves with any set terminology. And we know that both language and understandings of identity within our community are consistently changing, and that some identities have also received more attention than others. So we need to be sure that our resource groups are changing at the same pace in key areas like communications and programming to adequately reflect all LGBTQ employees. In this session today, we'll give you some concrete suggestions on how to do that. Before we get started, let's review some quick logistics for today's call. This is a broadcast audio call being held from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard, meaning you should be able to hear the sound through your computer. If you begin having issues with this at any time, please feel welcome to call in to the number provided. If you or a coworker is listening but unsure how to sign in, go to readytalk.com, click Join a Meeting, and use access code 6946521 to join. If you have any logistical questions during the session, just chat those in, and I'll be there to help you find a solution to your problem. We'll also be chatting out messages periodically throughout the webinar, which you'll be able to see in the chat box. And we're actually going to start with one of those messages right now, which is a link to Out&Equal's LGBTQ+ terminology guide. So I'll be sending that out to everyone now. We know that some of the terms in today's discussion may be new for some of you, so we encourage you to be using this guide as we go in case there are any terms you're unsure about, so we can focus really more on the content in the discussion rather than the terminology within the presentation. So you can access that link in the chat box, and if there are any terms you're still unsure about, please feel welcome to chat in and I can provide some clarification. This webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording and the slide deck will be shared with everyone who registered after the call, so you can watch it again or you can share it amongst your networks. And then finally, for those HR individuals on the line, please also note that we're going to be offering SHRM credits for today's session. So if you're interested in obtaining those, please feel welcome to just respond to the follow-up email you'll receive after this session, and I'll be able to send you the activity ID. I also want to mention a couple of webinars and events to look out for in the next month from Out&Equal. We'll be hosting our next webinar on Thursday, July 25th, which will be a case study of Outforce India, Salesforce's India-based ERG chapter. This session will discuss what steps Outforce leaders took to get this chapter started, and will be full of good tips if your company also has operations in India or elsewhere in South Asia, and you're wondering how to go about getting an ERG started there. That same week, we're also excited to be hosting our first 2 Southern States forums in Dallas on July 22nd and in Atlanta on July 26th. And these forums will focus on advancing workplace inclusion within the southern region of the United States, so really taking into account particular regional barriers to equality there. So if your company has operations in the South, we'd love to have you a part of that conversation. Now I'd like to actually jump into today's presentation, and I'll start by giving a warm welcome to both of today's speakers. We'll be hearing today from Tracy Denton and Monique McCann, both of us representing Air Products and Chemicals, where Tracy works as a manager in diversity and inclusion, and Monique works as a product and project engineer. They originally led this session at our 2018 Out&Equal Workplace Summit, and it was a very interactive workshop, but they've updated it for today's audience. So obviously, while we're kind of working within a webinar platform, I do still want to encourage you to really utilize the chat function as much as possible to really make today's conversation as interactive as we can. And I'll hand the presentation over to Tracy and Monique to talk a bit more about that. So take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Ben. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Unintentional Exclusion. Illuminate your ERG's blind spots. And like Ben said, we presented this as a workshop at the Out&Equal Summit this past October, and we're really excited to share it in webinar form. And we have done some adaptation, and we're asking you to participate as much as possible. So here we'll go through our webinar's purpose. You'll see that we would like to increase an understanding of how less visible members of our community can feel excluded. We're going to be discussing some strategies to address gaps in inclusivity and share our learnings. And that's really what it comes down to, sharing learnings and best practices for increasing inclusion in our community as a whole. So as Ben said previously, be prepared to answer some poll questions and give us your thoughts via the chat function. This will be a great opportunity to share and learn from each other.
Okay, so we're just going to do brief introductions now. My name is Tracy Denton, and I am the Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Air Products. I've recently moved into this role, but I've always been involved in ERGs at Air Products, and specifically I've been really involved in our LGBT ERG for 25 plus years.
Great, and I'm Monique McCants. I work in our Crown Machinery division at Air Products as a product and project engineer. I've been at Air Products for going on 5 years now, actually, and I've been involved with Spectrum, our employee resource group here at Air Products, our LGBT employee resource group rather, for about 3 years, and I recently joined on as the chair last April, and have been working in that capacity for the past year and have been having a great time doing that. And so you're going to be hearing from both Tracy and I going back and forth throughout our presentation, and we just wanted you to hear both of our voices. All right, so just a little bit more about Air Products. We are the world's safest and most profitable industrial gases company in the world, and we supply atmospheric and process gases, things like nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and we have a really large market share in the hydrogen fueling business and have about 15,000 employees and operate in about 50 countries with over $8 billion in sales, just to give you an idea of the size of our company and sort of where we operate.
So stay on that slide for a second, Monique, if you could.
Sure thing.
So you'll also notice that in our highest level corporate goal is not only to be the most profitable and the safest, but to be the most diverse. And that's kind of new. We elevated that goal last year, and it's really driven a lot of renewed interest in our diversity and inclusion initiatives. So moving on to that, what is our diversity and inclusion goal at Air Products? Like many of your companies, you probably have very similar inclusion goals. We've tried to be really consistent in using this format of our goal, and we really cascade it throughout the organization in every diversity and inclusion scorecard and discussion. We keep referring people back to this goal, which is all about reflecting the places we do business by having that diversity in our employees. And then, of course, to leverage the benefit of that diversity, we want to value the differences that those diverse employees bring to the workplace. So that's all about culture. So this is the way we've captured this elevated goal. One of the ways that we are working on the culture aspects of our goal is through our inclusion network. So this is really a forum where all of our ERGs come together to drive inclusion across the organization and really leverage the fact that together we're more powerful than we are individually. But yet each ERG also retains its own unique goals and its own individual communities and their needs. So this has been very successful for us. So a lot of our initiatives are ERG-based, but a lot of our initiatives are across all ERGs, and they're really to improve the overall inclusiveness of our culture. Okay, Monique, over to you.
All right. So, as I said previously, I'm the chair of Spectrum, our LGBT plus employee resource group at Air Products. And Spectrum is one of 7 of the ERGs that makes up the inclusion network that Tracy was just speaking of. And we're really proud of our many accomplishments. Last year, we had our 25th anniversary celebration, and we continue to earn 100% on the Corporate Equality Index at the HRC. And we're really proud that this is Air Products' true goal. And we strive to continue to foster inclusion in our work environment.
And the pictures are a really fun anniversary celebration we had at our local baseball stadium last year. That's our chair, Stephanie Britton, with her daughter, and that's another one of our very active members with her wife. So that was a really fun day.
Absolutely. All right. So we're actually going to do a quick poll here. So the question here is, how many of your ERGs have members who are comfortable identifying as the following? feel free to select multiple options.
Ooh, and the results are coming in.
Go.
Wow.
All right. Great. This is great to see. I love seeing the results coming in actively. All right. So 85% at gay or lesbian, definitely a large portion of our organizations see that part of our community identified. We see that there are some that we don't see as often, and that can be a result of us not being as inclusive as we would like to be, or not creating the space for them, and we would really like to open that up. And that's really what this workshop is about, this webinar is about. So great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead.
It's nice to see that such a high number of ERGs do have members that identify as bisexual. That's a nice 55%. That's a little higher than we've seen in the past, so that's refreshing.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
A lot of allies as well.
That is
wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that.
Okay, so the next poll that we're going to do in a moment is we're going to ask how you on the phone identify in terms of what is your sexual orientation and then what is your gender identity. Okay, so the truth is that this is really a dummy poll. Maybe that's not a good word. That's not a very inclusive word, is it? It's not a real poll. And we did this when we were in the room. It had a little bit of a different effect when people were in a room in person. Probably on the phone, people would be very comfortable identifying because it's so anonymous. But we're doing this just to try to search within you, how comfortable will most of us be in a room when we're asked to identify our sexual orientation and our gender identity? Like, for example, I am actually quite comfortable doing that, right? I am, well, kind of lesbian / pansexual, and I'm cisgender female. However, my big learning recently in the last few years has been that there's a lot of people who are not comfortable identifying, and it brings up all kinds of emotion for them, and that we have to be aware of this and not create that as a boundary in our ERG to people joining. So that's been a big learning for me, and just kind of asking those of you on the phone to give some thought to whether you're comfortable identifying, and even if you are, just recognizing the fact that a lot of people aren't comfortable. And it's not that they're necessarily in the closet or they're afraid to identify. Some people don't like being put in a box. Some people don't like a label. They feel it's very confining. Other people actually aren't really sure. They're on a journey. They're still discovering things about themselves. So I think we have to honor all of this.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a question that I've asked myself multiple times, Tracy. In what rooms am I comfortable identifying who I am? And I'm often reminded of a time when I was forced to identify or identified and felt excluded as a result of it. And so moving on to the next slide, I want all of us to take a moment to reflect on a time when you felt excluded at work, possibly because of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. And here's where we would like you to use the chat function to sort of share and type in how that experience made you feel. It can just be one word thought or a brief sentence, and I'd like to see some of that come in.
Angry.
Angry, yeah, that's the first one I see. Absolutely.
Yeah. How about some other reactions? Disappointed.
Disappointed, absolutely.
Left out.
Hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
Frustrated, less worthy, sad.
Less than, like I didn't have a voice, like I didn't matter.
Oh, that's a good one too, confused as to why people felt uncomfortable, not valued.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing. I do appreciate that. And I think, yes, we all have had an experience in which we felt excluded and felt invisible and lonely and not valued. And doesn't feel great, and we would hate to do that to members of our own community. And there are things that we can do to move towards a place of inclusion.
Absolutely. Do you want to pause here for a moment and tell that example that we have?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay, so even though I think anyone who's LGBT has probably had a situation where they felt excluded because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity, but yet we do it to members of our own community sometimes. For example, there is this term called gold star, as in, hey, I'm a gold star lesbian, how about you? And this we do sometimes at gatherings. We did it at one of our recent local conferences. This came up. And this is something that sometimes it's used to be humorous, but it's really not funny to a lot of our fellow LGBT peers, right? It makes people feel like, well, if I haven't been with women my whole life, then I'm less of a lesbian than you. Or what if you're bisexual? Or what if you're pansexual? Am I somehow less LGBT than someone who's been in relationships with women all their lives? So again, this is kind of a learning as well, because I think I used to joke around about this myself several years ago, and it's really, now it's almost hurtful when I hear it. So that's an example of something that we can do in our own community, kind of pay attention to what we're saying and make sure that we're not leaving out, especially the less visible portion of our community, like bisexual, asexual, non-binary, people that really don't want to be labeled.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that kind of brings us to the next portion of the workshop, of the webinar rather. So really moving to that place of remembering what it feels like to be excluded, and then making sure that we're not making anyone feel that way in our ERGs, and that we're being intentionally inclusive. So in the workshop, what we did was, at this point, we split into teams, and each team focused on one portion of our spectrum, and we brainstormed ways that our ERG could be intentionally inclusive of that segment of our population. For example, we had a group focused on bi and pansexual. We had a group focused on people that identify as queer or just don't want any label at all. We had a group focused on trans, and then a group on people that are closeted or questioning or still discovering. So what we're going to do now is, because it's really hard to do an interactive, webinar as much as we want to chat, we're going to actually share with you the ideas that we brainstormed as a workshop. So each group came up with a whole list of ideas, and then we picked out the best ideas and reported out, and we captured all that. So that's what we're going to share with you today. And we're also going to ask you if you have any additional best practices that we didn't think of that you could share. Okay, so the first list is on the bisexual, pansexual, and asexual inclusion ideas. So the first idea we came up with is to get more visibility and more awareness, to capitalize on the fact that there are holidays now, for example, called the Bisexual Visibility Day, which is September 23rd. We find it's always helpful when we celebrate something at our workplace that's also celebrated externally. It just makes for a nice tie. It makes for a nice awareness. People hear it outside work. People hear it inside work. So that's one thing. To celebrate the Bisexual Visibility Day, you could have a panel, for example, maybe a panel of people either inside your company or outside your company that identify as bisexual, and ask them questions about the kinds of issues they face in the workplace. You could hold events for parents, for example, that have children that are identifying as bisexual. Another idea would be the fact that the ERG can really be open about the fact that, like, let's say you have an ERG where you really don't have bisexual, pansexual, or asexual voices. You can be very open about that and signal that you really want that voice and you welcome that voice in your ERG. If you do have some ERG members that are bi or pan or asexual, you could set up kind of a subcommittee within your ERG. That's what we've done for transgender, for example. And then we regularly ask them for their input, and we regularly check in with them about whether they're feeling included or excluded. Because, again, this is a situation where you don't know until you ask, right? Another idea that came up is, hey, what if my ERG doesn't have any bi or pan members, but we still want to be inclusive? And we don't want to wait until we do have members, right? Okay, well then we had an idea, well what if you designated someone as the bisexual, the pansexual, the asexual representative, even if that may not be their identity, their orientation, their job would be to represent that as best they can in your programming, in your ERG. So do some research, try to become as much of an expert on that as they can and represent that viewpoint so that you can kind of develop some programming even before you have those members. And then the final thing was to be specific and intentional about which orientation and gender identities are included and discussed. Don't lump everything into, for example, gay, because then it makes people feel excluded. So on your website, for example, on your ERG literature, in any logos that you have, intentionally include asexual, bisexual, pansexual, aromantic, as many things as you can include so that we don't make anyone feel excluded. Okay, so now on the topic of bi, pan, and asexual, are there any other best practices that we're missing here? Oh, here's one. So Melissa says, they don't ask people to identify in their ERG. Oh, so how would we know if you had bi or pansexual members? Oh, that's a good question. We've gotten away from requiring or expecting people to identify as well. However, as people join the ERG and we get into more organic conversations and we get to know each other, a lot of times then we do share our orientations with each other. If you literally never talk about your identities with anybody in the ERG, I'm not sure how you would do that. It does come up for us, again, as we get into deeper conversations, like not the first minute that someone shows up. Here we have another one, intersex. Absolutely. Let's explicitly include intersex.
Absolutely.
I should have included that in my list. Thank you for that. Okay, if we don't have any additional best practices on this, we're going to move on, but we're going to ask at the end if there's any other ideas.
Great. So moving on now to trans inclusion ideas. Some of these are very similar to ideas that were shared on the bi, pan, and asexual slide previously, but highlighting calendar day celebrations. So Transgender Day of Remembrance on November 20th. It can be a great way to make meaningful events that are culturally and socially relevant at that time of year, and it's easy to tie in, just like Tracy said. Again, so the next line here is to get input from members of that community. So get input from trans members of your ERG. The best way to understand someone's needs is really to ask them and be willing to listen to our trans colleagues. In the same way that a subcommittee can be created for bi and pan, we have a subcommittee here called the Trans Inclusion Team, and we understand that that's a great way to get a focus on trans inclusion. So there is a line here that don't focus too much on transition. So after listening to our trans colleagues, we understand that a focus on transitioning can be overbearing for the organization. I think that it's an important process, but it shouldn't be the only focus in discussions. Trans people are more than their transitions, and we have more to listen and learn from them. Out&Equal has a non-binary best practices guide that is very, very all-inclusive and helpful. And so the next idea, include non-binary, I think that guide is something that can be very, very useful. Under the trans umbrella, non-binary part of the conversation is often overlooked, and that's a great way to bring that conversation to the forefront. So the next idea, that ERG should advocate for gender-neutral bathrooms which serve all genders. There's more about the use of gender-neutral bathrooms even in that Out&Equal guide, and that's something that we've taken on here at Air Products and have called our gender-neutral bathrooms and made sure that they were visible. We've made sure that folks were aware that they existed, because it was a great way to get the word out and show how inclusive our company truly can be. Next idea was to include pronouns on email communications. This is an easy way to set a precedent and make and normalize the use of pronouns. It's something that I've adopted in my email, and as something that we've disseminated throughout our trans inclusion team, and we're working to send that out to our greater organizations, something that's quick and easy to do and truly can show where we stand on inclusion. Again, so we'd like to ensure that we have gender transition guidelines, and the key point there in that idea is to advertise them. Again, having a gender-neutral restroom that no one knows about doesn't really do much good. Having gender transition guidelines that no one knows about doesn't do very much good, and it can really be a great way to let it be known where your company stands on including everyone, and we should not hide that. And so now I'd ask as well for any other inclusion ideas for trans inclusion. And we're getting some in.
Yeah, Sarah mentions that we shouldn't forget about Transgender Day of Inclusion as well. In addition to the Transgender Day of Remembrance, we also have Transgender Day of Inclusion in March, which is so wonderful.
Yes, at the end of March. It's definitely a more celebratory aspect of or day instead of Day of Remembrance, or along with Day of Remembrance. We can do both. That'd be great. Thank you for that, Sarah.
Ron's pointing out there's a lot of other terms we want to include: gender fluid, gender queer, absolutely, right? When you can, like on your website, list them all, right?
Great. We have someone who hosts a Transgender 101 workshop at our site at least once a year. It's a great way to introduce people to the term. Great. We also hear that there's a trans speaker series. Peter is sharing about trans speaker series where we bring people to talk about their experiences. Absolutely.
Excellent. I love that idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. They had a trans employee give a talk about the process of transitioning, a trans task force. This is excellent. Excellent ideas.
Yeah, I love it. This is great. And here at Air Products, we had a trans inclusion panel discussion in celebration of Pride Month as a whole, but our ERG decided that there needed to be a focus on trans inclusion and really decided on this, our task force, the trans inclusion team, decided that a panel was a great way to get some differing views and some much needed input from the trans community. Great. Excellent. I love it. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you so much. There are so many great ideas.
Yeah, and of course we're sharing all this, so you'll have this whole list of ideas.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for the next category we focused on was how to be inclusive of closeted and questioning folks that are either in the closet still, or they're questioning, or they're just not ready to identify or prefer not to identify. So one idea we had was to promote National Coming Out Day as much as Pride, right? And hey, it's another opportunity to celebrate. Why not do it twice a year? As many of you are mentioning in the trans inclusion section, same kind of thing, right? Do LGBTQ 101 training on terms, definitions, the spectrum, the fluidity. Maybe show a movie and have breakout sessions. People suggested that Love, Simon is a really great movie to use for kind of a broad audience. And hey, popcorn doesn't hurt, right? People show up for free food, we found. Share stories. And then what we've already said, right? Just make it clear that when people come to your ERG meetings, they do not have to identify. There's not going to be any pressure to identify. You know, it is not an AA meeting. It's not part of the format, the meeting agenda, or the expectation. Also, another suggestion was make sure you have visible non-LGBT allies so they feel really safe that there are LGBT folks and allies all at this meeting. That helps. Another suggestion was one company found that anonymous surveys were very helpful. They actually found that 40% of their members were willing to share their story anonymously about why they don't come out at work. And that is such good information to have, even if you have to gather it anonymously. Model good behaviors, this is the last one. Yeah, and just this is for me, right? This is literally my learning. Challenge myself in my assumption that everybody has to be out and visible. I grew up in the 80s, and that was it, right? Be out. But really gotta question that. Not everybody has to be out. Not everyone likes to be the token. Okay. Any other ideas specifically for closeted or questioning folks and how to be inclusive? Here we have Melissa at Ford. They have ally stickers that allies can hang on their cube. Love it. We have magnets as well. That's been a big hit actually. And it sure makes the LGBT people feel so good when they walk down the hallway and see all those magnets and stickers. Book clubs, oh, love it. Buddy system, that's a great suggestion. Oh, ally lanyards, that's a great one.
And I love this idea, electronic badges on internal online directories. You can have badges electronically. That's a great
Oh, that is a great one.
Love it.
These are such good ideas. Great. Okay, second to last one. We got to keep moving. So we
keep on moving.
Things.
All right. And so here we have some queer and unlabeled inclusion ideas. And the reason this is a little sparser, I think, is, well, a lot of the ideas that we've shared previously for closeted and questioning and for trans inclusion truly can be applied to include queer and unlabeled folks. I would say some of what came up here was learning about why people feel constrained and by labels. And again, this comes back to listening to the communities that we're trying to serve and represent. And have listening sessions with younger employees. I will point out again that Non-Binary Best Practices Guide for Out&Equal has a lot of information about talent acquisition and attracting millennials and Gen Z folks who are twice as likely to identify as non-binary. Truly, they will become 75%. We will become 75% of the workforce at some point, and so that's something that we have to prepare for now. And again, we have watch videos as a group on queer and unlabeled folks and discuss sort of a book club, anything to look into and have get a glimpse into the needs of that community within our own.
Great. I see another really good suggestion here from Stephanie. Send messaging out to all regions, if your company is multinational, that is, to be visible even in countries where people can't be out, so at least the LGBT employees in those countries know that your company stands for inclusion, even if they can't be out themselves. That's a great suggestion.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Last slide.
Last but not least.
The game plan.
Okay, so last but not least, we have some ideas that were captured for inclusion for the general LGBTQA plus population. So renaming your ERG. oftentimes a rebranding effort can make all the difference in an inclusionary type of feel for your ERG. So make sure to discuss the options and across multiple regions if that's applicable for your company. And explicitly including all possible members is important. So the second idea here, having an ERG mission statement that makes inclusiveness a top priority. So explicitly including, and we've talked about this already, explicitly including bi, pan, asexual, trans, non-binary, and questioning, etc. Making sure, and all the other terms, exactly. And making sure, again, so here during employee onboarding, this can be an incredible time to reach out to folks who are brand new and be inclusive right away, right off the bat. So making sure that folks have someone to reach out to and making that sort of a D&I landing page accessible for new employees can mean the world. I mean, I think of what I would have liked to see when I hired on, and it would have made all the difference. So ally stories, creating ally stories. Allies are highly important, and I think we've talked about that, and Out&Equal talks about that a great deal, but sharing their coming out stories, the reasons why they're allies, can mean a lot to the community. It's a powerful tool. And the idea here for holding events outside of work, wow. Sometimes you get more participation, and it's definitely a different audience. It does say that there, but that is absolutely true. Some folks might not feel comfortable in a workplace setting joining in the ERG, but you get them outside of work and it has a different feel. You gain a sense of camaraderie that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I think it makes your ERG stronger. So last, let's see, optional self-ID. This is a great way of understanding who is in the workforce and in a way that's voluntary and completely optional. So in that, we need to consider the entire spectrum of possibility in the community in our self-ID, and using the term, I guess this is a good point, using the term other is not something that we would like to use in self-ID. Using a term like not listed here perhaps can be a better way to go about that. And we would like to ensure that we're including everyone in this. And again, I'm just going to open it up to general inclusion ideas. We've gotten so many so far that have been wonderful, and thank you for sharing.
Ron has some good ones.
Ron has a lunch and learn. Yes, lunch and learn idea. Bring your whole self to work. It applies to everyone. And let's see what else Ron has here. Events for the whole company, sponsored by the Pride ERG. So that's a great way to include the entire company and show a little bit about your ERG in the process. Great.
Yeah, love that.
And we got a question about capturing these ideas and sharing them to the group, because we are getting quite a lot of ideas, and it's great. It's great, and they are all written down. So, Karina, I'm going to likely talk to Ben after this, and we can see what we can do there. Great.
All right, so now we're closing in on the
Here we go.
conclusion, but we do want to talk next about how you take these ideas, right? So one nice thing might be to take this back to your ERGs and kind of have your own brainstorming session and say, which of these ideas do we really want to focus on? And then what you do is you pick the ideas that you want to focus on, and then what we did is we made an action plan. Because without an action plan, nothing's going to happen, right? So for example, back maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we focused in on our action plan. We wanted to make our ERG name more inclusive. At the time, the name was GLE, Gay and Lesbian Empowered Employees, which is not inclusive enough. So we sat down. The plan we had was we had a contest for a new name, select the new name, and then launch the new name with a communications plan. Okay. Another example was to make the ERG terminology more inclusive. So how do we actually do that? Well, we had our ERG, around the globe discuss it. We voted. We chose LGBT+. We formally changed all our communications, and we launched a new name of the communications plan. So this is just an example of how you take one of those ideas and then you have to make an action plan of how you're going to implement that. So what we really like to encourage you to do.
Yes. What we'd like you to do so is focus on 1 to 2 ideas and create your own action plan. And again, we will be sending these slides out, and a lot of the ideas that have been shared today and that we got in our workshop and have disseminated to you today can be easily taken and used at your companies. This is something that can be easily done using the sort of action plan format that Tracy just talked about. It's just a matter of focusing in.
Yeah. I see some more ideas coming in too. Lisa says they highlight ally role models for the month of April. Oh, I love that. We've done something similar to that in the past. We've had allies share their stories, and it was people really enjoyed that. It was very impactful.
Absolutely. Awesome.
And then Stephanie has another good point. We mentioned our trans inclusion panel that we had 2 weeks ago. We had excellent participation, and I think the key was that we had senior leaders in our organization send out the invitation to their organizations, which not only encouraged them to attend, but also gave them permission to attend and made it that the workshop was valuable use of their time. So that has been very successful for us.
Awesome. All right, and last, we would like to leave you with this quote from Jean Varnier. Each human being, however small or weak, has something to bring to humanity. As we start to really get to know others, as we begin to listen to each other's stories, things begin to change. We begin the movement from exclusion to inclusion, from fear to trust, from closeness to openness, from judgment and prejudice to forgiveness and understanding. It is a movement of the heart. All right, and thank you all for participating. And if you have any questions at all, we've now moved into the Q&A portion.
Okay.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
we have one
Thank
already.
you both. Thank you both, Tracy and Monique, for leading that presentation. And I just want to remind everyone, I know people have been sending in a few questions throughout. Just keep in mind we've been getting lots of chats in, so if you have any questions that we didn't get to address earlier on, feel welcome to ask them again, and we'll make sure that we can address them during this Q&A period. So we also
we have a question
here.
Go ahead.
Yep, from Anthea asking, have you discussed looking at the intersection of the community and how to shed light on excluding people of color, disabled, and other monitory groups within the LGBTQ community and your ERG specifically?
That's a great question, Anthea. So that's something that that we're looking to address within the Inclusion Network. So as we mentioned previously, we have an organization here at Air Products that spans all of our ERGs and leverages all of our ERGs at once. And doing events together can be something that definitely helps to bridge that gap and sort of realize how to shed light on communities that exist within our own community, so people who are intersectional, in fact, and so excluding people of color, disabled, and other minority groups within the LGBTQ community. Something that we can do is to have joint projects with our fellow ERGs. So we have a Black Employee Resource Group. We have the Latinx Employee Resource Group here at Air Products. And as well as enable our employee resource groups for differently abled communities. And that's something that we're all working to do, and something that definitely needs to be addressed within our community as well.
And we're lucky enough that we have members of one ERG in other ERGs. So that's really, we have that kind of cross-pollination, which helps when you're talking about intersectionality.
Yeah.
There was another question that came in about policies. that many of our companies already have policies that cover non-discrimination protections, same-sex partner benefits. But really, when we look back at those policies, do they really cover all the needs of LGBT employees? And I think that's something that we all have to really look at. I know that we have more work to do in that area. You know, even though our non-discrimination does cover gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, I think some of our other policies need to be revamped.
We got a question from Lee about a PowerPoint on LGBTQ 101 training terms. And that's something actually that we definitely referred to Out&Equal's term sheet for this. So that's something that I believe Ben can help with. We have our own version of it, but a lot of it was taken from Out&Equal and the HRC, but we definitely do have training terms available via Out&Equal.
Yeah, and that was shared earlier in the chat function, but I can send it out again in our follow-up email after this call to make sure everybody has access to that.
Ben, would it be possible for you also to send a link to that non-binary, Monique, what's it called? The non-binary.
Yep.
The non-binary,
guide. Guidelines.
That's right.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that everyone who's on the call today gets.
Yeah. Here's a good question. How do you bridge the gap and keep the groups connected when you have multiple business locations? Yeah, that is tricky. We have a chapter of our ERG in the UK, and we have regular meetings with them. We also have a diversity group on the West Coast, and we keep in touch with them, but I'm not going to lie, it is a challenge. I mean, just dialing into meetings remotely is kind of boring, so it's tough to keep everybody engaged, and we continue to work on that, and we're open to your suggestions.
Absolutely. We try to use technology to the best of our abilities. Having video and Skype conference calls and things like that are a possibility, but it's something that we're constantly working towards.
Yeah. Has our ERG received negative feelings, response from employees? Absolutely. In my role as the manager of diversity and inclusion, I have to deal with this frequently. I think you can make an impact one-on-one, right? Even when you're dealing with someone who has negative feelings about it, if you just stick to the business case, that's your best tool. The business case for diversity and inclusion, right? To make the company more successful.
We got a question on how to better attract and go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Oh, I was just actually going to say, so I think on that question also, so Tracy, I think that's a fantastic response in terms of, you know, if people have had a negative response to if somebody who's outside the community who doesn't like the ERG necessarily being there. But I think also thinking about, with the topic of today's session, you know, getting any pushback from employees within the ERG on this topic and on this programming, how do you kind of guide that discussion if somebody's pushing back saying we don't feel the programming is inclusive enough?
Oh, I see what you're saying. We're trying to listen to that. I think that we're not being inclusive, and that's one of the reasons that led us to take a hard look at ourselves and make some changes, and why we felt that we wanted to share this workshop with other ERGs. I think you really have to be open and listen. Again, I tried to share that mindset that I have, right? Being raised in the 80s. We're here, we're queer. You got to be visible. You got to be out, act up. You know, that's not where we are today. We need to be really inclusive and recognize that there's people that don't want to be out. That's perfectly fine. They don't want to be labeled, and we have to be inclusive of all of us. You got to take a hard look at yourself, I think, and talk to people through that. Be open to making changes.
Right. It's definitely about being open to making changes and hearing people out. It's going to require having hard conversations, and an ERG that is capable of making the space for that is one that's willing to take a hard look at themselves, right?
Totally. And Monique, I believe you were starting another question. I'll let you get back to that one as well.
Oh, I was. That's right. Okay, we got a question about how to better attract and support our bisexual community. Bi discrimination has happened within our community and within the straight community. And some of what I just said, I think, applies. It's hearing from the bi community to understand sort of their needs and being willing to change for them and change in order to include them. And And what I would say here also is that this requires us to understand bi erasure, to understand where we stand as a community and the issues that are associated with it. It's something that has been brought to light in the past few years. Bi erasure has become a topic of discussion at Out&Equal. They've had many bisexuality forums and roundtables and talks about the challenges, and hearing those out can truly help to shed light on the issues, and what we can do to help our communities is to be there for them and let them have a voice, hear them out, and erase bi erasure.
Yeah. One thing that I have found very helpful lately is kind of evolving unconscious bias training to a discussion about microaggressions. These are the little things that we say every day to one another, and the intent isn't bad, but the impact that it has on people of difference it can be really hurtful. And when you start talking about microaggressions, that lets you get at the kind of things that gay and lesbian people say that are really hurtful to bisexual and asexual people. And so, and when you can have that kind of open dialogue, I think then a lot of growth happens.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we have time for one more question here. We have a question asking if you know of any specific resources available for making sure your hiring practices are LGBT friendly. So it's a little different than the topic today, but I think this question, not only making sure that our hiring practices are LGBT friendly, but also ways that we can make them more inclusive to non-binary individuals, for instance, and how that might come up within the interview or the hiring practice.
Yeah, I think this is a new area, right? We're in a regular practice now of reviewing our job postings to make sure that they don't exclude women. That's kind of where we are in our evolution now. There's certain language people are discovering that if you use certain words, women tend not to apply for those positions. I think we need to evolve that, right? And think about, well, what kind of terms can we use that would indicate that this workplace was open to non-binary and people of different genders. So I think there's room for improvement there. One thing I will mention is that things have gotten exponentially better here now that we have transgender employees working here, because now they are on panels where we're interviewing employees. So as we get more LGBT people and strong allies at work aware of these issues, they're the ones that are interviewing and hiring candidates. So naturally now that opens up, it removes bias against LGBT candidates. And we've seen this in practice. So it's just one of those stories that it's hard to get that seat at the table, but once you do, it can really be powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Monique, do you want to add anything to that?
And I will. I'm going to mention the non-binary best practices guide again, just in thinking of hiring practices. Talent acquisition is one of the sections in that guide, and it's about attracting millennials and Gen Z folks. And a lot of what we talk about here is just letting it be known at job fairs, at places where we're doing recruiting work, that we are inclusive of the LGBT community, just by a little sticker, or you bringing your HRC Corporate Equality Index card, Best Places to Work card, and posting that, because that's not only going to signify to the LGBT folks that we're looking to hire, but to millennials in general, because millennials and Gen Zers are looking for jobs that based on values, based on a workplace where diversity and inclusion is valued, and we won't go elsewhere.
And I guess trying to use gender neutral language as much as possible is also important.
Absolutely.
And thank you for that non-binary best practices plug. Definitely appreciated. We've gotten through most of our questions here, so I actually want to wrap up today's presentation, and thank you again to Tracy and Monique for joining us and leading these conversations. This was super helpful. I love seeing these super concrete tips included in these slides. And as we mentioned, everyone who joined today, as well as if you, one of your colleagues registered but couldn't make it to the call, we'll make sure that they also get a copy of the slide deck and the presentation that we went through today. And we'll try to summarize some of those other best practices that people were chatting in to make sure you're also getting those points in the conversation. Remember to join us also next month if you're interested in talking more about Outforce India's new chapter, their new ERG chapter in India and kind of how they got that established. I would love to see you as part of that conversation. And for those who are on the call who are looking to access SHRM credits for today's session, again, we'll be sending out that follow-up email, and so just respond to that email asking for the activity ID, and I'll be sure to follow up with that. Tracy, Monique, do you have any last things you'd like to add to the conversation?
Thank you, everyone, for your participation and for all the additional ideas you provided.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It really added to our presentation and added to the feel of the webinar being a little more interactive, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely appreciate that, that interactive touch today. So thank you all again, and a reminder to please fill out the survey after the call, and we hope to see you next time.